I can't believe this. My friend, what a stupid bitch she is, cheats on her husband, but he has a surprise for her.
Wife was cheating for 4 years before I found out. I had the last laugh. Everything started falling apart one morning when I found a wedding ring that was not mine tucked behind our bedroom dresser. Not just any ring either, a man's gold band with an inscription that read, "Forever yours, M," on the inside. My wife does not have a name that starts with M, and neither do I. The discovery hit me like a physical blow to the chest, but I forced myself to think clearly about what this meant. For months, maybe even years, I had been noticing small changes in my wife's behavior that I had explained away or ignored completely. She started coming home later than usual from her job at the local insurance office, always with explanations about extra paperwork or staying to help coworkers. Her phone was always face down now, and she took it with her everywhere. She became more secretive about her personal schedule, often mentioning plans that she had not discussed with me beforehand. Her mood seemed different when she came home some evenings, more energetic and talkative than usual, like something good had happened during her day. The frequency of our intimate moments had dropped to almost nothing over the past year, with excuses about stress, headaches, or just being too tired. When I tried to plan date nights or weekend getaways, she always found reasons why the timing was not right or why we should save money instead. Looking back now, I realize how obvious all the signs had been. But when you love someone and trust them completely, your brain works overtime to find innocent explanations for suspicious behavior. The ring changed everything because there was no innocent explanation for why another man's wedding ring would be hidden in our bedroom. I sat on the edge of our bed for probably an hour, turning that ring over and over in my hands, trying to process what I was looking at. My hands were actually shaking as the reality of what this meant began to sink in. She was not just having an affair, she was having an affair with a married man. And somehow his wedding ring had ended up in our house. The level of betrayal felt suffocating, like I could not get enough air into my lungs, no matter how deeply I breathed. 12 years I gave to this marriage, 12 years of believing we were building something together. And she had been making a fool of me for 4 of them, and she had been living a double life for who knows how long. I carefully put the ring back exactly where I found it and spent the rest of the day acting completely normal while my mind raced through everything I thought I knew about my life. When she came home that evening, she kissed me on the cheek like always, asked about my day like always, and talked about what we should have for dinner like always. Watching her perform this routine while knowing what I now knew was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. She was so good at pretending, so natural at maintaining the facade of our marriage, that I started wondering how long she had been practicing this deception. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I did not sleep a wink. I began planning what I was going to do about this situation. I was not going to confront her immediately. I was not going to break down and demand answers. I was going to be smart about this, methodical, and I was going to make sure that when everything came out, I would be the one holding all the cards. The next few weeks were the most mentally challenging of my life as I began systematically gathering information while maintaining a completely normal facade at home. I started by becoming more observant about her daily patterns without making it obvious that anything had changed. Her evening book club meetings suddenly seemed worth paying attention to. The morning grocery shopping trips that took 3 hours started getting more scrutiny from me. I began noting the time she left, the time she returned, and the explanation she gave for where she had been. Most importantly, I started paying cash for everything and hiding small amounts of money from each paycheck in a separate account she did not know about. If this marriage was going to end, I was not going to be caught financially unprepared. I started paying closer attention to the small details that I had been ignoring. When she said she was going somewhere, I actually listened to see if her story made sense. When she came home later than expected, I noticed. A few weeks after finding the ring, I decided to follow her on one of her evening outings. She told me she was going to the book club at her friend Ann's house, the same story she had been using for months. I waited 15 minutes after she left, then drove to Ann's neighborhood and parked where I could see the house. My wife's car was not there. I waited for 2 hours and it never showed up. When she came home that night, she talked enthusiastically about the book they had discussed and how Ann's husband had made them all coffee. Every word was a lie, delivered with perfect confidence and sincerity. A few days later, I called in sick to work and followed her again. This time, she drove to a small apartment complex about 20 minutes from our house, parked in front of Building C, and walked up to a second-floor unit like she had done it 100 times before. I waited in my car, taking photos of her car and noting the apartment number. She stayed for exactly 2 hours and 15 minutes. When she came home, she said the book club had been canceled, so she had gone shopping instead, but she came home with no bags and no receipts. I spent my lunch break the next day at the apartment complex, checking the mailboxes to see who lived in that particular unit. The name on the mailbox was Michael Richardson. Michael M., the same initial from the inscription on the ring I had found. Everything was starting to make sense, but I was far from finished gathering information. Over the next month, I established that my wife was visiting this apartment twice a week on regular evenings and occasionally on weekend mornings when she claimed to be running errands. I also started researching this guy and discovered through a simple internet search that he worked as a supervisor at the same company where my wife's best friend from high school was employed. During one of my visits to the apartment complex, I noticed children's toys in the backseat of a car parked in his assigned spot. A few days later, I saw a woman with 2 young kids getting out of that same car and heading up to his apartment. It became clear that Michael was married with a family. Just like me, his wife's name was Jennifer, and based on her photos and posts, she had no idea her husband was living a double life. The affair had clearly been going on for a significant amount of time because my wife moved through this routine with the confidence of someone who had been doing it for years. She never seemed nervous or guilty. She never slipped up with her stories. She had become an expert at compartmentalizing her 2 lives. But now I was going to become an expert at something too. I was going to become an expert at strategic revenge. After 2 months of careful observation and planning, I was ready to execute the most satisfying revenge of my life. But I was not going to be reckless or emotional about it. I was going to be surgical. The first phase involved making sure I had legal protection and financial security before everything hit the fan. I consulted with a divorce attorney, providing all the documentation I had gathered about the affair. He advised me on how to protect my assets and what evidence would be most useful in divorce proceedings. The second phase was where things got interesting. I had discovered that Michael's wife, Jennifer, worked as an apartment manager for a large complex on the other side of town. Through basic research, I found out which complex and was able to observe that she seemed like a dedicated family person based on how she interacted with her children when I saw them together. This gave me several options for how to reveal the truth about her husband's double life. I also learned that my wife and Michael had been planning some kind of weekend getaway based on conversations I had overheard when she thought I was not paying attention. They were going to use another one of her fake stories, probably involving a work conference or a girls' weekend to spend time together. This gave me the perfect opportunity to time my revelation for maximum impact. One morning, I called my wife's work and spoke to her supervisor. explaining that I was planning a surprise for my wife and wanted to coordinate with her schedule. I discovered that she had not requested any time off for the following weekend, which meant she was planning to lie about having to work. Sure enough, that evening she told me that she had been asked to work a special project over the weekend and would need to stay late both Friday and Saturday. I told her how proud I was of her dedication and how much I appreciated her hard work. The irony was almost too much to bear. One afternoon, I put the final phase of my plan into motion. I had prepared a detailed letter for Jennifer Richardson, explaining who I was and providing specific evidence of her husband's affair with my wife. I included photos of my wife's car at the apartment complex, dates and times of their meetings, and copies of some receipts I had found that contradicted my wife's alibis. I also included a copy of the wedding ring I had photographed before returning it to its hiding place. But I did not just mail the letter. I drove to the apartment complex where Jennifer worked and had it delivered to her at the management office with a note asking her to call me before taking any action. She called me within an hour, and we had a very calm, very productive conversation about what we were both going to do with this information. Jennifer was devastated but also grateful to finally understand why her husband had been so distant and secretive lately. She told me she was going to confront him that night and wanted to handle it her own way. I told her I was planning to deal with my wife soon too, and we left it at that. That evening, while my wife was supposedly working late, Jennifer confronted her husband with all the evidence I had provided. She demanded that he end the affair immediately and call my wife to break things off. She also insisted that he confess everything to me personally. Meanwhile, I was at home waiting for my wife to return from her fake work project, preparing for the conversation that was going to end our marriage. But first, I wanted to watch her lie to my face one more time. I wanted to see just how far she would take this deception when she thought she was completely safe. When she walked through the door at 10:30 that night, I was sitting in the living room with a cup of coffee, acting completely normal. She kissed me hello and immediately began talking about how exhausting her work project had been and how glad she was to be home. She was still lying, even after Michael had confessed everything to his wife, even after their affair had been completely exposed. She was still looking me in the eye and lying. That was when I knew I had made the right decision about everything that was going to happen next. The next morning, I woke up early and made my wife breakfast, acting like everything was perfectly normal. She was in a great mood, probably thinking she had successfully pulled off another weekend of deception. She had no idea that her entire world was about to collapse. Around 9 a.m., while she was getting dressed for her supposed Saturday morning errands, I casually mentioned that someone had called for her the night before while she was at work. I told her that a woman named Jennifer had called and left a message asking my wife to call her back about something important. You should have seen my wife's face. She looked kind of nervous but said, "Okay." Her hands actually started shaking as she tried to maintain her composure and ask casual questions about what Jennifer had said. I told her that Jennifer had not provided any details, just that it was important, and my wife should call her back as soon as possible. My wife stammered something about not knowing anyone named Jennifer and suggested it might have been a wrong number. But she immediately grabbed her phone and went into the bathroom, clearly trying to figure out what had happened. I could hear her making frantic phone calls, probably trying to reach Michael to find out what was going on. When she came out of the bathroom 15 minutes later, she looked like she was going to be sick. She announced that she was not feeling well and was going to skip her errands and stay home. That was when I told her we needed to have a conversation. I walked to our bedroom and retrieved the wedding ring from behind the dresser. I brought it to the living room and placed it on the coffee table between us. I did not say anything else. I just sat there and waited for her to explain. She stared at the ring for probably 30 seconds without saying a word. Then she started crying, but it was not the kind of crying I expected. She was more angry than sorry, more frustrated than ashamed. She tried to claim that she did not know how the ring had gotten there. She tried to suggest that maybe someone had planted it. She tried to redirect the conversation by accusing me of snooping and violating her privacy. But when I calmly started reciting dates, times, and locations where she had been with Michael, she finally broke down and admitted everything. 4 years. The affair had been going on for 4 full years. It had started as an emotional connection at a company party where her friend worked, had progressed to regular meetings, and had eventually become a full sexual relationship with ongoing plans for them to leave their respective spouses. She admitted that she had been planning to ask for a divorce within the next few months. She had been systematically lying to me for 4 years while planning to destroy our marriage on her timeline, in her way, when it was convenient for her. But I had ruined her plan. By the time she finished confessing, I was actually smiling. She asked why I was not more upset, why I was not yelling or crying or begging her to stay. I told her that I had already filed for divorce 2 weeks earlier. I told her that all of our joint accounts had been frozen, pending the divorce proceedings. I told her that I had already moved most of my belongings to a new apartment and would be moving out that afternoon. Most importantly, I told her that Jennifer Richardson had not only confronted her husband, but had also informed several key people in their social circle about the affair, including people at the company where Michael worked. I had spent months planning every detail of this revelation to ensure that both she and Michael would face maximum consequences for their choices. Michael had lost his job by Monday morning when his supervisor decided that his conduct reflected poorly on the company's values. My wife found herself suddenly single, unemployed, after she quit in embarrassment, and facing a divorce where her 4-year affair was fully documented. The best part was watching her realize that while she had been planning to leave me, I had been planning to leave her first. While she had been thinking she was in control of the situation, I had actually been in control the entire time. She had thought she was having the last laugh, but I was the one who got to walk away with my dignity, my financial security, and the satisfaction of knowing that her betrayal had cost her everything she thought she was so cleverly protecting. 6 months later, I was completely moved on with my life while she was still dealing with the consequences of her choices. That was the real last laugh.